رخصتنا بجين رخصتنا كنحكومية أكر نونروي الفربي با فرمو فرمي رخصتنا بجين دیارە نونەرێوێ یان نەبەشدارە یان دەڕێکمایە ڕێخستنا یارمتیە AAG دکتۆر ئێمی لویس بیم بلا کەرەمکێ بەرەوبەرێ ڕێخستنا AAG دکتۆر ئێمی لویس فەرموو
I don't understand
Yes.
Kurdish.
Sorry.
I have a paper to present.
Yes. دکتۆر پاول کێنگری ڕێڤەبەری گشتی ئێرەخستنا ڕۆژهەڵاتە ناوەڕاست میوانێمەی سیەم بەڵا فەرمی رخصنا سيام خيا رخصنا فاجين نونروينا نبشدارة أما الجل هردو ميفاني خا أنا لخا لا يمكن sorry yes now you were present yes we have
No, I have a video while I'm talking.
yes yes
You know that?
yes we have
At the same time.
yes our point here point here شاشة لسر شرحتك
Well, I did this
yes
at the same
كي
time. No volume.
بريزنتري خوختا فيش كي هيا أول ويدري أقالي هيا تمام
But no
yes
volume on it.
yes yes بله دست بکه لگل دکتورا امی دست بکن تنه 7 دقیقه ترى هنا شو پیشکش بکه ورگراندن دقیقه
I speak English.
افکاری ما ورد گرینن
I have my presentation in English.
yes
Yeah.
well present in English we have point here
It's at the same time.
yes yes افکاری ما ورد گرینن بو میوانه ما بله باشه 7 دقیقه بوده هنج بوده و جارخو پیشکش بکه پاشه و پرسکش تاوری کرد
I don't know.
You should use this to understand what is asking.
I know it's broken. The one at my seat was broken.
This one.
So you have to help me. But am I not going to be able to read this?
Just keep. So now it's okay.
No.
No, just speak.
بله تنگیم دو بیزن ها تنگینا ورگر ناگه مهانا
There's nothing here.
دنگ هنا ها
I hear something. Now I do, thank you.
بله تدنگیم دو بیزن ها باشه 10 دقیقه بترانش بود مجارا خواب کش باش دارا پشت بجی و پرسکش تاوری
Okay. I can begin?
بله
Are they going to lower the screen and show the video? It's simultaneous.
بله
I'm Dr. Amy L. Beam. I'm the author of a book entitled The Last Yazidi Genocide. It contains testimonies and evidence of the genocide based on my 4 years working for and living with Yazidis. You can contact me at amybeam@yahoo.com to buy a copy. It's not starting it. Start it. Yeah. I thank Prime Minister Nechavan Barzani and Rudaw Research Center for sponsoring this conference and the Kurdistan government for providing camps for 200,000 Yazidi IDPs for 4 years. Today is the 4th year anniversary of when Daesh attacked Kocho and killed all the men and teenage boys and abducted the women and children. I came yesterday from Kocho, where survivors have gathered to commemorate this Black Day. My NGO has gotten 700 passports, most of them for Kocho survivors. The Yazidis today have no good solutions. I offer 11 recommendations that reflect the wishes of Yazidis. The Office for Rescuing Yazidi Abductees has helped financially to return many of the Yazidis from Daesh. The cost of returning one Yazidi has risen from $3,000 to $13,000 or more. There's a serious problem for families to raise this money. The government does not provide financial assistance until after the survivor returns to Kurdistan. So, recommendation 1. Governments and NGOs should identify private sources to finance loans for families to return their loved ones from Daesh. Immigration for Yazidis is blocked unless they are survivors who were raped. Germany and Canada each offered asylum to 1,100 survivors. Germany did not let the men go with their families, so they are suffering from family separation. Recommendation 2. Germany should grant asylum for the men in the survivors' families. Australia is now taking survivors and their families, including the men. Immigration is the main issue for all Yazidis. It is an absolute certainty that all 400,000 Yazidis want and need to leave Iraq, not just the survivors. The US, EU, and UN recognized the genocide in 2016. Please, no sound. But have not followed up with any solution in spite of a tidal wave of evidence in pleading for asylum. Recommendation 3. The United Nations should pass a resolution for member countries to grant asylum to all Yazidis from Iraq with no other conditions for eligibility. In Sununi, on the north side of the mountain, a man asked me why I was the only American in Shingal helping Yazidis. I know the answer. In one word, it is visas. The Iraqi government will not give more than a 30-day visa to foreigners unless they come from Iran, in which case they do not need a visa. In 2017, the Kurdistan Asayaj blocked me from going to Shingal or Mosul. In 2018, I flew to Baghdad. It took me 4 months to get a 1-year multi-entry visa so that I would be allowed to go to Shingal. Baghdad refuses to recognize Kurdistan residency IDs or NGOs. The Iraqi army at the checkpoint to enter Nineveh has turned foreigners away, saying their 30-day visas issued at Erbil Airport are invalid. In order to get more than a 1-month visa from Baghdad, one must work for an NGO registered in Baghdad or have a contract with a private company or approval from the Minister of Interior. One cannot register an NGO without residency. One cannot get residency without having an NGO. Humanitarian aid and NGOs are being blocked, and Yazidis are being divided between Kurdistan and Shingal as a result of the political stalemate between Erbil and Baghdad governments. Recommendation 4. Baghdad government should grant 3-month visitor visas without bureaucratic requirements. Recommendation 5. The Erbil and Baghdad governments must resolve their differences to allow free travel between Kurdistan and Shingal. Recommendation 6. The road from Kurdistan to Shangal at Fishkabor should be opened. It is unwritten camp policy to turn away all journalists and volunteer humanitarians at the camp gates. No cameras and no journalists is the policy. Recommendation 7, remove requirements for NGOs and journalists to get permission from the Board of Relief and Humanities Affairs, that's BURHA, and the Duhok court before entering the camps. Replace it with a simple ID check and sign-in procedure. I recently visited every Yazidi village on the south side of the mountain. The only inhabitable cities for large returning populations are Shangal on the south side and Kanasur and Sinuni on the north side. The villages on the south side are empty except for Tel Kasab, where only a handful of families and shepherds are living. Shangal city has electricity about 60% of the day. I'll add, it was out for 12 hours last night. I came from there. The villages do not have electricity because Daesh removed the cables from the utility poles in many villages and destroyed the electric plants. Electricity was restored 2 weeks ago for Tel Kasab. There's no government water except for half the city of Shangal. Houses must rely on their own well water or buy from a truck, and not all well water is safe for drinking. Most of the cell phone towers are destroyed. The government gas station in Shangal routinely runs out of fuel. There are no shops, no schools, no clinics, no economy in the villages. There is no way for Yazidis to sustain life in the villages. Explosions have killed returning Yazidis every month since in 2018. The Iraqi army started bomb removal 2 weeks ago. Tel Kasab and Tel Banat are now clear of bombs. Houses that were not exploded by Daesh were burned to a black crisp. The doors, windows, electrical wiring, the fixtures and plumbing have been ripped out of the houses. To defeat Daesh, coalition airstrikes destroyed many major buildings that Daesh used as headquarters, including schools, government buildings, and chicken cooperatives. No compensation has been made to any family whose property was destroyed by Daesh or by the coalition. Yazidis do not have money with which to return to Shangal. Recommendation 8. The European Union should fund and implement its resolution passed November 20th, 2014 for the, quote, establishment of an international fund to be set up for the Yazidis to return to their lands and for the infrastructure to be restored, end quote. Recommendation 9. Kurdistan should establish offices for former Shangal residents to file claims for compensation for property damage, including claims against the coalition. Settle claims on an emergency basis within 3 months. Recommendation 10. Money that is being spent by the governments to maintain the IDP camps should be redirected to pay claims for property damages and to rebuild the infrastructure of Shangal. The only way that Yazidis will return to live in Shangal is to have their own protected region. They do not want to be governed by Kurdistan because the Peshmerga left them on August 3rd, 2014. Neither do they want to be governed by Baghdad. They see no hope of getting what they want, and this is why they are seeking immigration. Recommendation 11. Implement the European Union's 2014 resolution to create an autonomous Yazidi region. With the support of Baghdad and the UN, Yazidis should have their own defense forces to defend this region. I urge each of you to work to implement these recommendations. Thank you.
زۆر سپاس دکتۆرە ئەمیلویس پیم ڕێخستنە AIG میوانەمەی دووەمژی دکتۆر پاول کەنگری ڕێڤەبەرێ ڕێخستدا ڕۆژهەڵاتە ناوەڕاستە بە 10 دقیقە ئەگەر کار بێ مژارەخوا یان کەمترژی ئەگەر دەرفەت هەبێش بۆ مەجال هەبێم دەپرساژی بکەن فەرموو ئەگەر هەفکارێمە وەرگەڕێ دەین
We have a slide presentation. Sorry, we're trying to bring a PowerPoint presentation up. If you'll bear with us just a moment. I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference and those who have supported them in creating this very important and historic meeting. And I hope that this will continue annually and that this will become a larger and even more research-based opportunity for sharing information. Today we're drawing a lot of information from other countries about the process of recovery from genocide. We have some esteemed speakers from Europe who are bringing lessons from other places to help understand the way forward in Kurdistan, and that's very important. We also, however, need to collect data locally on what's going on here, because most people are working off of broad assumptions, many of which are incorrect. We need solid information for decision-making for all people involved in the process. I introduce a very sensitive subject to you today, that of the babies who are born from ISIS fighters of Yazidi captives. In presentations and meetings about the survivors, the issue of these babies is very often completely left out of the discussion. There was a very helpful fatwa from Baba Sheikh to help these young ladies come back and be accepted and married and reintegrated into their community, and the Yazidi community has widely embraced them. That's a wonderful thing. That might not have been possible some years before. There is energy now toward these babies and for issuing a fatwa that would accept the babies as well. These babies are not accepted. And I'd like to present some data, preliminary data, from a survey in a unique community in Semel district, where 7,000 Sinjari Yazidis settled in a small population of 1,000 Christians in a Christian village. What's unique about this community is that they've been there for 4 years, fairly stable until last October when 2/3 of them left to Sinjar, Sununi. And yet, those who remain have generally been exposed to girls coming back from ISIS, and even one in the village who has an ISIS baby. And this has softened them and softened their attitude toward these babies. Mideast organization, which I direct, with Jordan Greaser and Mr. Khalid Kudeta, conducted a survey of 100 heads of household. Khalid, would you note? This is Khalid Kudeta, Sinjari Yazidi from Tel Azer, who actually surveyed 100 heads of household, mostly men and some widows, in this mixed ethnicity village. This was late last month, so it's new data. We found 29% of the households had female relatives who were impregnated by ISIS fighters while in captivity. There were even more who were in captivity, of course, and more who were sexually abused. But this is the number that were actually impregnated. They became pregnant with ISIS babies. That's a very significant figure. There are no comparative figures from other communities. 99% of residents, essentially all Yazidi residents, said that the child of an ISIS fighter and a Yazidi mother should be allowed to stay with its mother. You may say this community is not representative of all Yazidi communities, and you would be partially right. There are some slight differences. But the wide, almost complete support for these mothers with ISIS babies is strongly evident. In this chart, I compare the acceptance of reintegration of the mother with the acceptance of her marriage to a Yazidi man after she's returned from ISIS. As you can see, the Yazidis are accepting the women, They're accepting those who have aborted fetuses from ISIS. They're accepting babies, they're accepting women who have abandoned their babies. But at a much lower rate, still a majority, they do support the women who come back from ISIS and keep the baby. The majority, more than half of the residents, Yazidi Sinjari residents, accept the mother keeping the ISIS baby. There has been discussion that a fatwa would not be possible to help the babies of ISIS because the Yazidi community would not support it. These are the first data on the subject, and they seem to counter that idea. It may be possible that those who are most activist Yazidis are part of the opposition group, but if you ask the rank and file Yazidis, the heads of household, they are more supportive of the ISIS and Yazidi babies. That support for marriage and reintegration, however, does not transfer to the child in a large way. Only 30% said the new Yazidi husband that marries this captive girl, former captive, should adopt the baby from an ISIS father. And a similar percentage said the baby should be baptized as Yazidi. So it is true that 70% still are not sure that the baby should be baptized as Yazidi and accepted, fully reintegrated. This creates a very difficult situation for a mother with a Yazidi baby who desires to keep it. In our experience, nearly all of the Yazidi women who return with an ISIS baby want to keep the baby and struggle to do so against families and communities that do not accept it. Another issue about supporting the mothers with the babies. The majority, 95%, wanted facilities in their communities where Yazidis live that support these mothers with ISIS babies. They don't necessarily want the mothers in their home or the babies in their home, but they want a facility there to take care of them. Yazidis are humanitarians. They do support these children when they understand what the needs are. And 72%, a smaller figure, said the Yazidis must protect these babies from ISIS in their own community, but they do not. Currently, there are only 2 shelters that I know of for women with babies of Yazidis, but they reject the women with babies from ISIS at their door and tell them to go back to Mosul to their rapists' families and live with them. They are rather gruff with them in dismissing them. These are in Sharia and Kanki. So the difference between 95 and 72 seems to be reflecting that the Yazidis would support international organizations, foreign organizations, to set up facilities in their own communities that would help care for these children. And then the Yazidi community would support in whatever way it could the humanitarian effort. And this is my recommendation, that such facilities be created and that the Yazidi community support in whatever way they are able to, given the differences of beliefs among them, the children and mothers who decide to keep them. There's only one private and one public facility that will protect these girls with babies now. And in the public facility in Dohuk, the women are subject to, it's majority Muslim Kurdish women, and they were subjected to great persecution as Yazidi mothers of ISIS babies, and so do not like to stay there. As a result, they moved to the one private institution that has been set up to help them. Again, all Yazidi women, essentially all, don't have a large sample, I confess, of women and children with babies from ISIS want to keep their babies. It's their families who don't want that. Most fetuses are aborted, sometimes in late term, but usually not. In the beginning, late-term abortions were seen, less so now. Babies are usually abandoned under duress from family members, usually the grandmother of the infant. And the abandoned babies usually die. So there's a broad assumption in the Yazidi community that if the Yazidi abandons her baby in a health facility, that it will be adopted out and raised in a lovely home and survive. But my UN contact followed up on babies transferred to Baghdad and found that 100% of them had died within 3 days. They are not thriving. They are not being adopted well into families. There are 5 causal factors that I see here at work in failure to reintegrate these babies. 1, women have lower status than men in this region and among Yazidis. 2, family and community decide for the mothers whether they should keep the baby, whereas in other nations, the decision is the woman's regarding the baby. Anger against ISIS and desire for revenge sometimes gets painted on the infant of ISIS because it's tied to the father, the ISIS fighter. They say it's an ISIS baby, it will grow up and kill you. There's a false assumption that the abandoned babies thrive, they die. And Yazidi religious leaders have policies that reject the baptism of these babies currently. There are 5 preventive factors also that we could expand upon. Having a relative who was impregnated by ISIS makes people more accepting of these babies. Having delivered a baby from an ISIS fighter makes a girl very supportive of mothers with Yazidi babies. There are strong maternal-child attachments between these women and their babies that makes them want to keep them from the minute they're born, if not before. If communities are exposed to a mother with an ISIS child, they change. They point to that woman and child and say, well, she's here and we support her, so it's okay. It's amazing how that has changed the community in which we did this survey. There is one such woman with a baby. Finally, having an ISIS Yazidi child in the community is helpful, and having a care facility is also helpful. We have difficulties documenting these babies. It costs about $2,500 to document one ISIS baby from a Yazidi mother. The Muqtars refuse to provide documents that will establish the mother's own ID that allow the baby to be ID'd. There's persecution from legal authorities of the mother who tries to keep the baby. The child is identified as Arab Muslim, not as Yazidi, on the ID. The child takes the name of the terrorist father. The mother has no choice about the name other than the first name. Several trips to dangerous places, Tel Kef and Mosul, are required for the mother and the baby. And we've had to find a supportive Kurdish judge who will smooth the process and make it possible. Also, to get a passport, the mother must have her own ID, which is difficult. And then there's a prohibitive cost of $500. That's an informal pay to the authorities in the passport office. It's not an official charge. The mother has to obtain an ID for herself and her baby before she can get a passport, and there's a very long wait. So finally, the action steps: raise awareness of the problem, advocate for the babies, refer the babies to the one safe home that there is in Semel area, provide stipendships to support the women and babies who are there. Most of this money is now coming from international sources, not local sources. Make legal funds available to the Yazidi women so they can get their IDs, and if they want, they can go to other countries. Provide extensive mental health services and streamline immigration services. At the break and after the presentation, Mr. Khalid Kudeta will be glad to speak to you in any of the local languages if you have specific questions. He's intimately involved in this project. Thank you very much.
گەلێکی سپاس بەرز پاول کەنگری. تەنێم کارن ئەگەر دەرفەت هەبێت دوو پرس ژناو بەشداران هەر نونەرێ ڕێخستنەکە یەک پرس بەس پرس نەشیرۆڤە کەرمکە ji bo kê pirsa xwe dike? Belê. Bes bi kurtî mamosta.
زۆر سپاس. عەرزێکی زۆر باش بوو. من سپاسی دەکەم کە خۆی زۆر مهتەمە بە بابەتەکە. ئێمەش مهتەمین پێی، بەڵام وێنەکە تا ئەو حەدە ڕەش نییە بەتەئکید، چونکە ئێمە لە ناو مەوزوعەکە داین زۆر بە ڕەشبینی تا باسی بابەتەکەی کردووە. ئەوانە بەو شێوەیە ڕەفز نەکراون، ئافرەتەکان بەگشتی ڕەفز نەکراون. منداڵەکان ئەوە ئێمە ئاگدارین منداڵەکان لە شوێنێکی زۆر ئەمینن زۆر خۆشیشە دایکەکانیان سەردانیەکەن و تەواوی مافەکانیان پێدرێ بەڵام من ئەمەوێت تاکیدی بکەم کە وێنەکە بەو شێوە ڕەشنیە بەداخەوە
ما پرست خواست ئەگەر یەک پرس بۆ خاتون ئێمەی با ئەو خاتونە بۆ خاتون ئێمە بکەنا یەک پرست کایە وەڵاهی پرسگرێکا دەمە She will ask you.
So,
I
get passports. We've gotten over 700, and we don't have to wait for an appointment for the survivors or their families. And we don't pay $500. It is true. It is true. It is true that people pay $500 to get a passport, but we have never paid any money. The Duhok Passport Office has a relationship with my NGO, and we get them. The other thing I want you to clarify, your slide said one thing, but you said another thing. You said 20% of all the women get pregnant. But I think you, and I don't want the audience to get it wrong, I think you mean families. 20% of the families know a relative, and a family might have 100 people. So 100 people might know one woman who's pregnant. I would not get that statistic wrong.
It was 29% of the heads of household have a relative who was impregnated by ISIS.
بله سپاس بس یک پرس او خاتون پرس بوده بکرتی پرس نشیرو بله او مای کبا عيش بكي
Yes, my name is Kani Arif. I'm coming from Seed Foundation. My question is for Amy. I know Amy quite well as well. One of the recommendations from Amy was to resettle Yazidis out of Iraq abroad through a UN resolution. I was thinking, how realistic is that, and how this will change the demographics here in KRI or in Iraq?
Yeah, that's why I say there are no good solutions for Yazidis. This is not actually my recommendation. This is what Yazidis want. I can't find any Yazidis who don't tell me this. Yes, it would change the demographics. The governments could not continue to say you're a secular government, you embrace all religions, because you're already like 0.5%, less than 1% minorities, and Yazidis just don't want to live here anymore.
أنا قال لك سباس بو دكتورة إيمي لويس ريفا برار خستنا أي جيج بو عليكارية هروها قال لك سباس بو دكتور باول كينغري ريفا بريقشتي رخصنا روشلاتا نافراست كو بهواني بباشيا دانشتا بابو سباس نعم تمام بكر سباس
سلاورس جینۆسایدی شوناس از ویجاره جوار پیشکش کم روشنا ویجاره میوانید ما دکتور محمد احسان سروک زانگه نێودەولەتی حولیره و بحثا دیروکا سیاسی جینۆسایدی لکردستان بکتن هر وها کشین جینۆساید ئێزدییان للدراسات هفچرخ جینۆسایدی دا دکتور سورین مانوکیان جگری سروک مزاخانه و پیمانگاه جینۆساید ارمنیان و پیشکش بکن بلا کرم کن آخفتن کرین ما دکتور محمد احسان هر وها دکتور سورین مانوکیان دکتور وهرام پتروسیان سروک بش پیوندین کردو ارمنی زانینگاه یریوانی ارمینیا بلا کرم کرد دکتور وهرام دكتور أدوين شكر جيجري سروكي كونغرا جوهين أوروبا بريطانيا بلا كرم كار دكتور أستير سبات زانينجها ناوەندا أوروباي دكتور أستير سبات دكتور فهرام خيادك نا أمادينها برزان هر میوانه که ما آخفتن کریمه تانه 7 دقان و با خوال سر مجاره کجره هاتیه دست نشان کرن هر یک جوانا جی مجاره خواه آماده کریه دکتور محمد احسان سروک زانگاه نێودەولەتی اولیر بحثا دیروکا سیاسی جینۆسایدی لباشور کردستان دیگه دکتور کرم که.
Thank you. I'll start to speak in English because we have a lot of international speakers. In order to share with you and to be direct for you, at least to give you a background about the political history of genocide in this part of the world. Iraq, by weather, we have 4 seasons, but in politics we have only 1 season, always hot, from its creation until today. That based on historical, geographical, the composition of the country, the tribal structure, and non-existence of a good governance from its creation until today. Really, Iraq has been through a lot of stage. Occupation, mandate, kingdom, independent, then it was to be Republican of Iraq. If we look at all the states of Iraq, genocide, it was part of the political culture in this part of the world and in this country. First, genocide in Middle East after Armenian, it happens by Iraqi government in Sumer in 1930s. That was the main reason for Raphael Lemkin, who started to develop his research and to try to coin a legal concept about genocide in the world. This is why I labeled Iraq as genocidal state. Due to many things and due to many reasons. The structure of the country, lack of a good governance, nationalisms by all type of nationalisms which exists in this part of the world. It might be geographical factors and failure of traditional justice. For Yazidi, it was totally different things. Yazidi, they've been victims for 74, 73 genocides. If you look at the states, the curve and the dates, it was always for 2 reasons, either dictatorship or state failure. I think internationally, well, they are one of the samples or example. Normally, in many parts of the world, they say that dictatorship is the main source of multicultural, multi-religious victims of genocide. But with Yazidis in Iraq and Syria, it proved that the state failure also is one of the main sources of genocide again. Another factor, it was foreign invention. Foreign invention always in Iraq, it was one of the main factor of genocide perpetrators. For me personally, I think if we look at the history of the region and what Yazidi has been through and how Iraqi Kurdistan has been through many stages of genocide, 30 Assyrians, then Faili Kurds in 1970, 79, 83 Barzani Kurds, then big campaigns of Anfal, and after that Arabization process. If you look at all these stages, it was a state who were the main perpetrators of genocide. But with Yazidis after 1911, the failure of states, a lack of a good governance, corruption, and non-implementation of Article 140, because I was in charge of it, and always I was warning Iraqi government that if you are not going to sort out the land issue, we are going to end up with another genocide and another problems recurs in the area. I personally think we are living in part of the world which is history repeats itself a lot. And the only things which repeats in history is history. Because we cannot learn from history in this part of the world and in Iraq. In addition to that, the failure of transitional justice. It happens now, I think now it's a correct time for all organizations and for activists to think about transitional justice after the genocide of Yazidis. So what we can do now, okay? We can't be like victims always, try to cry and say that we were victims till the end, which means we are going to continue to be victims. We have to look to other examples in the world. Look at for the good samples of transitional justice, to empower our victims, to look for the justice for the perpetrators. And if we think that ISIS had become history, with Yazidis and in this part of the world, really we are going to be below history. Because the same mentalities exist. They are everywhere. Look at the number who's been killed in Sinjar, Yazid by Peshmergas or by coalition forces, and look at your victims' number and try to drop it on the map. It will be, you can clearly, any man with a sense, he can find out that the machine of ISIS is still there. They're undercover because your neighbor who killed you and who raped your daughter or your mother, she's still around. Whenever he gets more power, he's going to commit more dangerous crimes against you. This is why we have to think about very correct and clever transitional justice. And we have to think of, I think, my proposal, I think we have to empower our victims and salute for your leaders who accept the victims. For me, I was very reluctant from the beginning about the women who've been raped, how they are going to be accepted by Yazidi community. I think international community should say salute and best respect for Yazidi leaders who managed to recontain or regain empowering the victims who have been raped. Based on my experience, even it was in Africa, it was not easy. In Rwanda, it was not easy. In Sierra Leone, it was not easy. In Bosnia, it was not easy. With Jewish communities, it was not easy. With Armenian, it was disaster after 1940s. Really. I'm not going to talk a lot, and thank you waiting for your questions. Thanks.
دكتور محمد إحسان سروك زانجان نێودەولەتی هەولێرێک و ئەزمونەکە دوور و درێژی هەبوو ژیانینا ڕووفاتین گۆڕێن بکۆمیە ناوەڕاست و باشووری عێراقیین کوردین باشووری کوردستانی. پرزگرێکین جینۆسایدا ئێزدییان للدراساتین هەفچەرخین جینۆسایدیدا دکتۆر سورێن مانوکیان وێ پێشکەش بکە کو جێگرێ سەرۆکێ مۆزەخانە و پەیمانگا جینۆسایدا ئەرمەنیانە دکتۆر سورێن فەرموو.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to share my ideas, the results of my research with this audience. I tried to do my best to prepare a presentation because 10 minutes it's not possible. Yes, it's not enough to present any topic, but just in brief, just in brief, and I will try to be in this limits of time. So the title of my topic is the phenomenon of Yazidi genocide in the academic field, of genocide studies. Genocide studies is a relatively new academic field, and some scholars try to start the roots of the field from mid-1940s when Raphael Lemkin coined the term genocide. But I think it's very far-fetching exaggeration, because that time, even after the adoption of the Genocide Convention, the term genocide was marginal. This genocide even was not involved in the Nuremberg, in the verdict of Nuremberg tribunals. The Holocaust studies emerged in 1960s. Later, in 1980s, the Armenian genocide scholarship joined, and subsequently the field received an extra impetus in 1990s. Then in Rwanda and Yugoslavia, massacres took place. And the first conferences on genocide began to be held, and a network of scholars was being formed, and later would leave, this network of scholars would lead to the creation of International Association of Genocide Scholars in 1995. And now it is the biggest organization which unites about 500 scholars who are involved in study of different mass atrocities, mass crimes, and genocide, first of all. Over the last 2 decades, this field of genocide study was dramatically expanded and matured, and from the early 1990s, we can speak about a new direction as a field that unites historians, political scientists, psychologists, and even economists and physicians to investigate different aspects of genocide, of this phenomenon, because it's not just political crime. Of course, it's first of all political crime, but the consequences of genocide are very, very complicated in different spheres, even in medicine, in economic conditions of these territories, in memory studies. Now, genocide studies no longer stands in the shadow of genocide studies. It's now the primary subject of journals, textbooks, encyclopedias, readers, workshops, seminars, conferences like this conference. But even in this field, we have some disbalance of the topics, disbalance of the subjects. About from 60 to 70% of scientific results, articles, conferences, books, cover only 3 so-called classical genocides: Armenian genocide, Jewish Holocaust, and Rwandan genocide. Others are less presented and in some way marginal. Here you can see this chart prepared by Professor Alex Hinton from Rutgers University of New Jersey, and he tried to distinguish different genocides, and here you cannot find Yazidi genocide. I think it's somewhere here in the forgotten genocides chart. Yazidi case, of course, some scholars have slightly touched the topic of Yazidi killings in their books, primarily on Armenian genocide. Taner Akçam, Mogorungur, Donald Bloxham, but only Israel Charny, one of the founders of International Association of Genocide Scholars and editor-in-chief of Genocide Encyclopedia, tried to raise the topic more specifically. In 2011, he wrote an article in special issue of Journal of Genocide Prevention Now, in which was dedicated to Armenian genocide along with Assyrians and Greeks, and he mentioned the Yazidis, and he gave this article a very interesting title, The Virtually Unknown Genocide of Yazidis by the Turks along with the Armenians, Assyrians, and Greeks.
Turks or Ottoman Empire?
Yes, in Ottoman Empire, in the territory of Ottoman Empire. And I was just to quote, in 1915, 1918, the upper circles of Ottoman Empire, taking advantage of the conditions of the World War, organized and realized genocide of Turkish national minorities. During the few years, the Ottoman Empire actually slaughtered the native peoples of the country, Armenians, Assyrians, and Greeks. Nowadays, the world is aware of the fact that many people are in the state of power. The world's most progressive countries condemn the Armenian genocide in the Ottoman Empire and the Greeks and Assyrians. However, this is a sorrowful list of people destroyed by the Turks. And the Yazidis, a distinctive and native nation on the territory of Ottoman Empire, are never mentioned. In this article, he also tried to outline some areas, some numbers of victims, for example, in one province more than 100,000, in other provinces. Also, he mentioned some regions, some areas in Yezdistan where Turkish perpetrators slaughtered Yazidis. And why is this article so important? Why I tried to construct my presentation on this article? Firstly, because it's not written by ordinary scientists, but it was one of the pillars of genocide studies, very well trained, and one of the iconic persons in genocide studies. And in his at the end of his article, he wrote, undoubtedly, politicians and experts should know how many Yazidis were victims of the Turkish state in various settlements. And he also appealed for political activism to bring this issue in political debate. At the same time, however, at the time, Charny's appeals remained unanswered. I have looked at leading scientific magazines on genocide, Journal of Genocide Research, Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and Genocide Studies and Preventions for 2011, 2014. And also I tried to see the programs of international congresses of International Association of Genocide Scholars held in 2011, 2013, and 2014. And there is nothing about Yazidi genocide.
Yeah.
The claim of Charny remained unanswered, and unfortunately, till the genocide of Yazidi population by ISIS, the academic world remained silent. Yes, I try to sum up. Yeah. The second round started in 2014, and after the violence against the Yazidi population in Sinjar. And here, when we compare this period, we can find many articles in scientific journals. For example, here you can see some of them. I outlined them in Genocide Studies International, in Journal of Genocide Studies. Also, some presentations in IGSA congresses, and it's very interesting. Last year in Australia, we had even one panel dedicated to the topic of Yazidi genocide, and some things, some problems, and what can we do? First of all, we have, of course, there is a lack of relevant scholars. Although some progress is noticeable in terms of growing interest in the topic, but it's clearly linked to recent developments. This theme is fresh, and geopolitical developments contribute to it. It's hard to predict what happens if the media coverage will change. For example, and if I think it's a very time when we can use this favorable situation to prepare at least dozen experts who will start a serious and long-term study of Yazidi genocide. The second thing, using the interest in the current issue, we can increase interest to the Yazidi victims during the 1915. We cannot neglect that massacres and that in Ottoman Empire. And the last thing, we have shortage of sources, and scholars have to work meticulously to find in Armenian, Turkish, and Western sources some information about the Yazidi victims of the genocide in Ottoman Empire. And to succeed this goal, we need human and financial resources. For nowadays genocide, we need more oral stories, interviews, and not only with the survivors, but if it's possible, also with the perpetrators of this genocide.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
سپاس دکتر سورن مانوکیان جگری سروک مزاخانو پیمانگا جینوسایدا ارمنیان امه نها گوداریا بابت السر براوانی و بحث کرنا ناسنامه ئێزدییان و وانەوەرگرتن ژە جینوسایدا ڕەگەزی یا جوهیên عێراقê دکتۆر ئەدوین شکر جێگرێ سەرۆکێ کۆنگرە جوهیên ئەوروپا بریتانیا بێ پێشکەش بکە. You can speak, stand up as you. Okay.
I am Edwin Shukr, a Jew and an Iraqi. I was born in Batawin, in Baghdad in 1955. I grew up until we managed to escape in 1971 at the age of 16. We left behind our homes, our language, our shrines, our culture and heritage going back 2,600 years, ever since my people were brought here as captives by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. My people built a civilization in Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. In the early 20th century, 40% of Baghdad was Jewish. Today, there are only 5 people left. When I was 8 in 1963, my nationality was taken away and replaced by this yellow card, only for the Jewish people. When I was 14, in January 1969, I saw my people, 10 martyrs, Jewish martyrs, hang in the public square of Baghdad and the public square of Basra. Ladies and gentlemen, a society that tolerates intolerance and displays racism will not stop with one component of the society. It cannot. And what started on this Saturday moved on to Sunday and now Wednesday. We need to uproot this prejudice from the roots. We need to uproot Daesh, not only from our cities and our streets, but from our hearts and our minds. We need to stand together, Muslims, Christians, Mandawis, Jews, and say enough is enough. Let us go back to the core of Iraq, to the core of Rafidain, what made Iraq great, what made Iraq the cradle of civilization is diversity. I am here to express my solidarity with my Yazidi brothers, not as a Jew, but as an Iraqi. I'm here to offer support and solidarity to all Iraqis. Let us build a new one again. And for my Yazidi brothers, I share with them the experience of the Jewish ethnic cleansing. I ask you to keep meticulous records of what happened in the past years. Because even the Holocaust, where 6 million people, Jews, were killed and gassed, even that, you have people who will eventually deny it ever happening and question the numbers. I want you to fight for legislation and constitution in Iraq itself. Don't be timid. Today, in Iraq, after the constitution of 2005, not a single Jew can ever recover back his nationality. There is a clause in the constitution that forbids Edwin Shukar from ever recovering his nationality. We need to fight together to prosecute your perpetrators. We need to bring them to justice wherever they are and wherever they hide. And you need also to take control of your destiny. You are victims of the international world and of your brothers, but you cannot stay victims within inside. You cannot see yourself as victims. Take control. Educate your young to what Yazidism is all about. Don't let emigration remove you from your own culture that is going back 6,000 years. Keep your shrines and preserve them. Pass on the heritage like you've never done before. And we are with you wherever you want us to be, here and outside in Europe and in the world. Yesterday, and in spite of security problems, and in spite of everyone advising me not to, I went to Mosul. I went to the mosque of Jonah the prophet and Nabi Yunus, a symbol, a Jewish prophet in an Islamic mosque in a Christian area, which is revered by Yazidis as well. That was the Iraq I know. And I tell you, that's why Daesh targeted that place in the first instance, wanted to destroy it from the roots. But I just found a place to pray in it. And I put on my kippah and I prayed. And do you know what I prayed for? I prayed for the soul of Iraq to be back with us and for us to watch each other living in harmony and peace like we've always done. Thank you.
سپاس بۆ بەڕێز دکتۆر ئەدوین شکر جێگرێ سەرۆکەی کۆنگرە جوهریە ئەوروپا بریتانیا. دوو سەرداژە جینۆسایدا ئێزدییان دکتۆر ڤەهرام پەترۆسیان سەرۆکێ بەشێ پەیوەندیان کورد و ئەرمەنی زانکە You too, you want to start that?
Thank you. Actually, I promise that I'll be short, but the title, actually, my paper is a brief on Republic of Armenia's input in recognition and condemnation of Yazidi genocide. So, as you know, the United States government officially declared in March 2016 that ISIS is responsible for genocide against Yazidis as well as Christians and other religious and ethnic minorities in Iraq and Syria. A subsequent report released by United Nations investigators similarly concluded that the Islamic militancy's actions against Yazidis meet 1948 United Nations Convention's definition of genocide. However, Republic of Armenia also has modest input in this process. The government of Republic of Armenia was the first one to condemn Yazidi massacres in Iraq. Actually, President of Armenia, Serge Sarkisyan, condemned the mass killings and deportations of Iraqi Yazidis shortly after they were first reported in summer of 2014. Sarkisyan instructed Armenia's foreign ministry and diplomatic missions abroad to redouble their efforts to adequately raise the issue in the international arena. In April 2016, leaders of Armenia's Yazidi community even inaugurated a memorial in downtown of capital of Armenia, Yerevan, to Yazidis and other peoples massacred by ISIS. And it was in January 16, 2018, that the Armenian National Assembly unanimously adopted a statement recognizing and condemning the genocide against Yazidi people in 2014 on terrorist-controlled territories of Iraq. The legislation actually was the first of its kind issued by a United Nations member state concerning the Yazidis. And in this document, I would like to shortly refer to this document. The Parliament was attaching importance to the efforts of international community aimed at implementing the provisions of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. The document highlights the obligation of states enshrined by the international law on respecting the rights of national and religious minorities. It emphasizes the commitment of the Republic of Armenia and Armenian people to fight on preventing genocides and other crimes against humanity. And it takes into account the 2170-2014 resolution of United Nations Security Council, numerous calls of international governmental and non-governmental organizations. I would like to, and what is important in this document, the first one, as I mentioned, by a United Nations member state, is that it calls on the international community to investigate these crimes through international procedures, prosecute and hold accountable the persons who committed these international crimes. Called on the international community to take measures to ensure the safety and protection of the Yazidi people, provide them humanitarian aid, as well as make all possible efforts to prevent, rule out, and eliminate similar human rights violations. What were the motivations of Armenians and Armenian parliamentarians in going and in being operated? I can't say that. Maybe some steps are too late and too small, but however, throughout the discussions and after the adoption of resolution, Armenian lawmakers were stating the following factors. First, Armenia should be among the authors of initiatives aimed at recognizing, condemning, and preventing genocides. Hence, the statement is of historical importance as a nation that has been subjected to genocide. We Armenians have to express out our stance on the condemnation and prevention of that crime against humanity. The second point was that had the international community or the superpowers recognized the Armenian genocide at the time, we would not witness genocides against Yazidis or other peoples. And the third point was that it is the moral duty of Armenia to support Yazidis. The friendship of Armenian and Yazidi people derives from remote ages. Both Armenians and Yazidis were persecuted and slaughtered at the Ottoman period. In these hard circumstances, they supported each other. A fact from history, in 1915, the Yazidis admitted to their midst about 6,000 Armenians who, by miracle, had escaped to genocide and provided them protection, food, and worship. Actually, this was the reason for the Ottoman and German governments to announce the Yazidis their sworn enemies. And it was in February 1917 that this decision was made by the two governments. In 1997, the decision was made in Armenia to annually observe June 15 as the Memorial Day to the innocent victims. And I would like to save your time and just conclude. What about recommendations? I have only one, that if only some points of this resolution of Armenian parliament would be enacted, that would be already a part of this chain. Recognition, condemnation, prevention, and also punishment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. زۆر سپاس بۆ دکتۆر ڤەهرام پەترۆسیان سەرۆکێ بەشێ پەیوەندیان کورد و ئەرمەنی زانیگەهای یاریڤان ئەرمینیا لەسەر 2 سەدەش جینۆسایدا ئێزدییان ئاخەوی ئەگەر چ پرس نەبن مامۆستا کەرەم کە مایک لەکویە
سپاس بۆ دکتۆر شکر براستی بحث ژیانە جوها کرد بەغدایە ڕاستە بنەمالێکە جهول بەغدایە بوو گوتنێ ماڵە شعشوع کە وەختێ مەلکێ ئێکێ عێراقێ مەلک فێسەڵێ ئێکێ هاتیە بەغدایە ئەو چۆت قەسرە شعشوعیدا هەروەساژی بەلکی ژۆرە بازرگانی العێراقێ وەختێ هاتیە دامەزراندن مجموعة 7 كسا 5 كس جي جهوبون ويكمين وزير دارايجي العراق ساسون دلال أو جي جهوبو هر وصاجيد بواري هونري وخطا دمايدا يكمين دولمند سرمدارة بغداد جي سروي دمي بنمالا لاوي وعدس كأو يكمين بنمال بون استيرادا سيارة فورد ومارسيدس تكرن بس الهيرة أسوك إزدياك از بیجم او برای جهو کونه قارین خول بروان هرشا بگرن پراستی ام وک ازدی ام گلکش پیش روژا خود ترسین
هرشن که؟
هرشن داعش يعني تسروي دمي هرشن حكومة تدبري بس ام في دمي كويت بن هرشا افان هزرت تندرودا كو امش بيجا روجا خود ترسين بس دمينت شكر بو خدي بشتي 2004 يكمين جيه كو حمو آينا ونتويد كيم يقاري خولي لا رابقرد او جي هريما كردستانيا قالك سباس
قالك سباس ما مصطفى with mic
Thank you. My question is for Dr. Muhammad Ihsan. Doctor, you mentioned many reasons behind the historically repeated genocide in the area, from historical to geographical and to the weakness of the government and corruption and all. You mentioned that are these all reasons behind the genocide. My question is, do you think that if the people in Sinjar wasn't Yazidis people, ISIS was to did the genocide or the crimes against them in the same way they did with the Yazidi people? Thank you.
Answer?
Yeah.
Yes. With no doubt, I can tell you yes. But for Yazidi, they had added value. Another reason to commit a genocide. Because the culture of genocide is there. The reason there were no Yazidis in Tos, for example. The plan, but for Yazidis to become, because they are Yazidi non-Muslim, the motivation for the perpetrator was stronger. And the majority of Yazidis, they consider themselves as a Kurd. That was another reason behind it. But for just one of the recommendations I've heard, that's to encourage Yazidis to go abroad and to live outside Kurdistan. Do you know that the perpetrator, what they're looking for? The perpetrator, they want to not see any Yazidis in front of them, to not see them there. If you want to leave the country, that's what they want. They need nothing else. If you leave the area and go to Europe, based on my experience, really, you are going to lose yourself.
But you say, I don't have a guarantee for life. Yeah.
There is no guarantee for life. But there is plans how to work. Plan your work, work your plan. Really. I'm telling you, I know it might be more than you know what they have there. And I think the threat of ISIS still exists. never ever think that the game is over. No. But I'm telling you, because of the disputed area and because of what was going on there before, the hatreds inside society, and I've just mentioned a couple of the reasons for genocide. Okay? But there are so many other reasons for that. You have current, deep-rooted reasons for committing genocide, and really what you heard in front of you in 2014. No, I can tell you yes. The chance for committing genocide was there because the area was so hot, hatred-wise, because of being Yazidi, or being non-Muslim, non-existence of the state, corruption, being Kurd, and disputed area. That was the reason. And historical background, of course. Of course, historical background.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah?
I want to make it clear that I don't consider myself a journalist. I'm a researcher and a writer. And I am not advocating, I forget the term you used. I'm not pushing for immigration for Yazidis because that's what I want. Yazidis are telling me that's what they want. And if they told me they wanted something different, that's what I would report. That's what they want.
I've heard the same argument. It happened in Kurdistan after 1988. A lot of Kurds, they were seeking for refuge and leaving Kurdistan. I think that was what the perpetrator wants. They want you to go away. As Yazidi, as Kurds, as Arab, as Turkmens, as Mandai. That was happened to Jews. But time was totally different. If we keep to think in that direction, believe me, the fate of Yazidi is going to be like the fate of Jews. The fate of Christians is going to be like the fate of Jews. I have a lot of Jewish friends. There are more Iraqis than the majority of Iraqi existed inside Iraq today. Believe me, they know more about Iraq than 90% of current Iraqis today. But the chance of leaving them away, to go away, leave everything behind, this is what they want.
Yeah. That's the idea. If you have question. Okay. Thank you.
Well, hello. My name is Orhan Ünlü. I'm a vice consul at the Turkish Consulate General in Erbil. First of all, I would like to thank to the organizers of this event, because it's such an important issue. But I guess some of the speakers just went out of topic and tried to make a connection between what happened in 1915 and what the Yazidi community went through because of Daesh terrorists. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as Armenian genocide. This narrative is one-sided, and it ignores the sufferings of Turks, Kurds, Arabs, and all the ethnic and religious communities that made up the Ottoman Empire. And today, our formal position, official position, is that we are ready to launch a common historical committee with Armenians, and of course with the participation of international researchers, academics, and reach a common point on this issue. So we don't see any link between these two events, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is it okay? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your, I don't know, maybe comment or question. But it's interesting, we know the official position of Turkey. We made several, you know that we are ready to establish diplomatic relations with Turkey without preconditions. So this position doesn't intervene into this. My viewpoint or my colleagues' viewpoint is not one-sided. Your recommendation to create a group of scholars and so on puts under doubt the very fact of genocide. That is why, for us, it's not a theorem like in mathematics, something to be proved. For us, it's already proved thing. So, and what about investigations and so on in research? Nobody criticizes this. This will happen whether Turkey or Armenia want it or no. Researchers do their work without so.
Yeah.
And what about diplomatic relations? You know that, dear colleague, that Republic of Armenia made, even new government of Armenia has already announced that we are ready to establish diplomatic relations with Turkey without preconditions. That's our position. And what about Turkish position? We know well on genocide and on diplomatic relations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Panela mai vesatej bidawi bo kak Mike bida mamstaji.
Hello, I have a question for Edwin Shuker. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. My name is Naudin Osman, and I would like to know what we can do as Yazidi youth to show the world what happened to us in case of writing or speaking or documentary. What is your advice for the youth to show the world the genocide?
It's clear? Understand?
Don't what is your advice to the youth to show the world in writing or speaking? How can we show that we have witnessed a genocide?
This show of genocide and all the things that I said, it is meant for the youth and only people of your age. Because we are witnesses, we can see what is happening. We don't need to read it in the history books, and we don't need to teach our children because we lived it. I do everything, including a film which will be shown tonight called Remember Baghdad, about the Jewish experience, not for me and not for my father, but for my son and for my grandson. So what you are raising now is the core of why I'm here and the core of why we are all here. As you heard, the researchers cannot even estimate now after 4 years. They are talking about 10, 20, 30. It's for you. And I will speak with you very happily afterwards. Come and see me, and I will tell you what you can do with for your age.
Thank you. دكتور كومنتك هبو يا داوي
مايك
دنگتا چه تمام
دنگه مده چه
بله
بس یک کومنت بکردی راستی هگر ما گوی خدا بتا پرزنتیشن دکتور سورینی تشتکی گلک باش اتبیجد اسندی برای خودم جنوساید ستادیز تشتکیم گلک کمترین تشت هیل سر جنوساید ازدیان نابد ام بو خو باخوین و بو خو گلیبین اتبیجم وقتی تماما ام بو خلکی باخوین بزمان خلکی تایبت الجانب اکادمی هگر والی نیت کردن باور که دوکی شیعال میت پشتی 1000 و چند ساله بس دیگرین و لطمیه کین اما دوره ماشالله افرو گنجن ازدیال همین جهه جهانه هنه بزمان وان تایبت بکاری اکادمی تل جورنالا که تل صحافه که لقاء که بکید مقاله که بنویسی فقاعه که زور جوانه بلام هكا كتابك دريخي المجلكة أكاديمي بحثك نشركي الدنيا همية بيبتدب زمان نێودەولەتی ديمين حتى تاريخي أفا أرمينيا وجهة السرفي كاري كاركر أمرو هكا تبي بري خبدي جنوسايد جزدياش بري أرمينيا وجهة بينا جلك بلام چل سروان زمانه چل سروان هاتيا نويسيني و چل سروان هاتيا نويسيني يا سروان هاتيا نويسيني 200,000 جارة بتره یا سر ازدیا هات
سوچش که
سوچ امین سوچ ام بخونه ام گورانی بیجن حمامانین پیتوی السرمه ام بزمان نێودەوڵەتی باخوین بتایبەت بکاری ئەکادمی کاری ئەکادمی لب بێوی کاریە ئاکتیڤیست بی تشتێکی زۆر مقدس و پیرۆزە بەڵام کاری ئەکادمینەکەی باوەرکە فقاعە تەنها من بێت بۆ کۆنفرانسی بێوازە
دکتۆر ئەس بێژم کاک محەممەد
Yes, I totally agree with you. And it was this, we passed this the same way. Firstly, we started to write about Armenian genocide. We Armenians who were survivors of genocide, who were descendants of survivors of genocide. And then after that, the international scholars joined us. And now you can find more non-Armenian writers on Armenian genocide, more non-Armenian scholars who are involved in Armenian genocide matter. I think even more Turks who are involved in Armenian genocide studies than Armenians itself. So the only thing you should do to start, and then I think it will be involved in academic career. But it's very, very important to do it.
Thank you, Doctor. محمد خليل قائم مقام قضاء الشنغالية كرم كه مايك ايره ما بيقدر
بس تبينيك من هوا سوباس بو في درفكي وبو في كونغري راستي بو دكتور محمد احسان راستا هفتي سي فرمان برين هو بسري يزيديات جينوسايد اغلبها هون صار دولة عثماني بسري ما هات ما هنجي بشتبانك ئێزیدیان ندید حتا جینۆسایدی خۆبکار بینێ حتا هەفتی و 4 چێ ببێت ئەڤڕۆ دەوڵەت سەرێ خودێ و مڵەتی ئێزیدیا و مڵەتی کورد و هەرێما کوردستانی و ئینسانیەتێ و وان مرۆڤە جینۆساید تا ئێزیدیا هاتی بۆ ئینسانیەتەیە بۆ عراقیە بۆ شەرق الأوسەتە مەدوێت گەنجێت ئێزیدیا بڕاستی دەورێ خوا هەیە و جرئەت هەیە هەکە پشتەوان و دەم هات بس مدوي بدراسة ومرحلية ودور بدنا جنجت إيزيديا دا كاربن قزيا خوا ببينن بشتواني مجي سوباس بو إنسانيتي وبو ملتي كرد كبشتواني إيزيديا أول جار تاريخ خود ديتيا في جاري كلي قوماني بشتواني دواني مدوي بشتواني بردوان بي سوباس
سپاس جبوی و کو گهدار کرد سپاس بو همو پانلیستان پیشکش کردن مجارن وان نها وقت دم خورنیا حتی ساعت دو انا ساعت 1 10 دقیقه حتی ساعت 2 مجال هست پشتینگی جاردن دست بدی کرم